Maka's guides.
Hey guys, Mac here with my Overwatch how-to series. In this video, I'll be talking about Mei, one of my favorite characters. If Pharah and Genji are the most underrated attack characters, Mei is easily the most underrated defense character. She can easily be the biggest shit disturber on the battlefield and be the peskiest and hardest enemy to kill if played properly. That's going to be due mostly to the fact that she has two primary weapons which she can use to either slow you down or do higher damage. She can self-heal and become invincible, and she has an ability to throw up a huge ice wall, as well as a decently useful team ultimate called her Blizzard. She also has 4 legendary outfits, which are Firefighter, Abominable, Rescue Me, and Yeti Hunter. Let's get into a few more details about what makes Mei so hard to fight against. First of all, she has her primary weapon, which is known as her Endothermic Blaster, having 2 distinct modes. The first mode shoots a small spray of frost that will slow down enemies and inflict damage over time, ultimately even completely freezing them and leaving them even more vulnerable to attack. The secondary fire on the Endothermic Blaster is an icicle which spends 25 of the 200 ammo. Although it spends more of your ammo and shoots a lot slower, it will inflict a lot more damage, up to 75 per shot. You'll notice that the spray can be very hard to use if you're not in incredibly short range, whereas the icicle can inflict damage even at mid to long range, so you want to cycle between those two depending on how far you are from your enemy and what goal you're trying to accomplish. Also, this gun takes a total of 1.5 seconds to reload, so you'll probably want to keep that in mind if you find yourself in a sticky situation. It's going to be a little bit tough if you run out of ammo. Moving on to her abilities, she has a Cryo Freeze ability where she instantly surrounds herself in a block of ice. As she's in that ice, she's completely invincible, and on top of that, she heals herself. While in her ice form, she obviously can't use other abilities or shoot or move, but it's still a good tactic to use and something you always want to have in your back pocket if you're losing a battle. The Cryo Freeze does have a long cooldown at 12 seconds though. Her other ability is her signature Ice Wall. I'm sure you've seen a lot of these around the battlefield, and this is an ability that allows Mei to generate a gigantic ice wall that you can do a variety of things with, like block off a path or block off a line of sight. You can stop enemies in their track and force them through a choke point, or just basically push them back and allow your team to regroup while the enemy team has to wait behind it. You can even use it in more creative ways, like trying to separate your enemies from each other or blocking yourself off in a corner so that high damage enemies can't shoot you. Now, in terms of understanding exactly how the ice wall works, it can be a little bit difficult to imagine, but hopefully this will help you out. Imagine that the ice wall is made out of 5 vertical columns, each column having exactly 500 health. Enemies can destroy each column by damaging 500 health, but to destroy the entire wall, they would have to destroy all 5 pillars of 500 health, meaning the wall theoretically has, in total, up to 2,500 damage available to be blocked. You'll also want to keep in mind that the wall won't stay up indefinitely, it only stays up for a total of 4.5 seconds, regardless of how much damage it takes. If enemies are able to focus on a specific pillar inside of your ice wall, they can penetrate it and get through. The ice wall does have one of the longer cooldowns though, at about 10 seconds. For Mei's ultimate, we have the Blizzard, where she throws a small grenade type object that emits a huge ice storm onto the battlefield in a gigantic circular area. Enemies inside of this area will slowly start to freeze, and if they don't manage to get out of the circle in time, will completely freeze, and it's also giving them passive damage as they're inside, up to almost 100. So now I want to talk about when and how to use Mei as a character, and there's a lot of different strategies here, but the best thing in my opinion is to play either a defensive or offensive role. It doesn't really matter as long as you adjust for your enemy's playstyle, and just make sure you're A, being a pesky brat, and B, using your ice walls to your team's advantage and not to the other team's advantage. One of the biggest mistakes that rookie Meis do is actually blocking off their teammates from successfully getting kills and using their own abilities, therefore making their team worse just by their mere existence. It's incredibly important to realize that not all ice walls are created equal, and some do have a lot more use than others. Don't just go around creating ice walls for the hell of it, where most of the time you'll actually be screwing your team over. What you'll want to do is try to find enemies in one-on-one battles and use your spray to slow them down into a freeze state. As soon as they're in a freeze state, try to take out your icicle and give them one shot to the face. If done correctly, most enemies with under 250 health should be able to be killed by Mei in one ammo clip. Now you'll probably find yourself in battles that you may not be winning, and what do you do in that scenario? You actually have a couple of great options. Number one, just throw an ice wall down directly in front of you and run away. I know this sounds like a little bit of a chicken maneuver, but honestly, it really does work. The other option you have is getting into your cryo freeze and just waiting there and calling for some team backup. Another great strategy is actually to cycle between both of these. If you're getting shot by a Reaper that's behind you and you can't put up an ice wall between you two, just jump into your cryo freeze, and as soon as your cryo freeze ends, be prepared to throw an ice wall directly in front of you and then run away. If you're cycling between your cooldowns equally, you should always be able to have some kind of defensive maneuver to get out of a battle you don't want to be a part of. If you're using Mei more as of a team character instead of a Slayer, your best bet is to stick back a little bit and make sure that you're using the walls to help out your team. What you're going to want to do is try to keep enemies in their spawn, try to separate enemies into multiple groups at a time, and you'll also need to make sure that you're using the ice walls to block ultimates, as Mei is the ultimate blocker. That's right, as soon as you hear it's high noon, just throw up an ice wall directly in front of your team and everybody is safe. Hear the chime of the annoying Bastion on the other team? Throw up an ice wall. Does a soldier have you in his sights? Throw up an ice wall. Reinhardt coming in for the pin? Throw an ice wall. Does Junkrat have a tire? Throw an ice wall. You get the point, guys. The ice wall is incredibly useful in blocking enemy ultimates, and it can block the vast majority of ultimates that the other team might throw at you. Even though she's not a support character, you'll be saving your team a lot of deaths if you're using them correctly. To reinforce what I said earlier though, you don't want to be using ice walls against your teammates by locking them in rooms that they don't want to be in, or by cutting an enemy off from their line of sight as they're about to get a kill. Instead, do the opposite and use an ice wall to maybe separate a Mercy from a group she's healing, or throw one directly in front of a Bastion that's taking out your team. You guys kind of get the picture, and as I go through some of Mei's weaknesses and strengths, you'll get it even better. You'll want to realize that her strengths are that she's a small character and has a small hitbox because of her size. She also has the ability to heal herself, which comes in extremely useful when you're trying to be a pesky brat. Like I said, the ice wall is the ultimate blocker, and she's able to block spawns to buy her team more time, as well as block enemy sniper line of sights. Her weaknesses, however, is that she does tend to have a low damage per second. Although she can freeze enemies, it does take her longer to kill enemies than most of the other heroes. She tends to not perform extremely well against large groups, especially in combat situations where she's actually trying to inflict damage and not just play a support role using her abilities. Both of her abilities do have a longer cooldown at 10 and 12 seconds, meaning that she's going to be using abilities a lot less than some of the other heroes. Also, her last weakness is that her ultimate overall is pretty weak in damage and extremely easily avoided. Although it can be quite useful in very certain situations, it only does about 100 damage, so you're going to want to make sure that you have your teammates shooting along with you once you use your ultimate and freeze some of the enemy team. You also want to keep in mind that characters like Reaper and Tracer and anyone with a lot of speed should be able to easily avoid your ultimate just by walking away. Now spend a little bit of time talking about when Mei is useful and what characters she's poor against, so what are her counters? She's going to be really good against Reinhardt by getting in there, blocking him when she needs to, and trying to freeze him, opening him up for attack so that he can't use his shield. Whenever you freeze an enemy, obviously their abilities are no longer useful to them. She's also really good against slowing down fast characters like Genji, Tracer, Soldier 76, and Lucio. These are enemies that will try to flank you and quickly get around your team, and freezing them can buy your team a little bit of extra time to shoot them. She's incredibly useful against enemy bastions as she can throw up an ice wall directly in front of them, therefore rendering them useless for about 4 seconds. She's good against Mercy because she can use her ice wall to separate her, and she's also going to be good against Widowmaker and Hanzo in order to block their line of sights. Just like every character though, Mei does have some enemies she's not that great against, one of them being Junkrat. Unfortunately, Junkrat does have his concussion mine, which he can place directly under Mei as she sits in her cryo freeze, blowing her up instantly as soon as she comes out. She also tends to be poor against enemies that are really quick or that can stun her while she's trying to freeze them. These are enemies like McCree with his flashbang, Tracer who can easily blink out while being frozen, or Reaper who can go invincible if he's fast enough. She's also really poor against Pharah, which can easily keep distance between them, making her very hard to take down. Because of Mei's low DPS, teams with Lucios tend to do really good against her because she's not able to inflict enough damage quickly enough to kill anyone. And then if the enemy team does have a Widowmaker or Hanzo that has a good sight on Mei, she will likely get killed pretty quickly. Moving on to Mei's achievements and trophies, we start off with Ice Blocked, which is her ability related one, for blocking a total of 1,200 damage with a single use of her ice wall. As I explained earlier, the ice wall is comprised of 5 pillars, each with 500 health, meaning that the total ice wall has about 2,500 damage to be absorbed. Your biggest problem is going to be getting it in a place where the enemy team actually does enough damage before the 4.5 seconds run out where the ice wall is taken down. Ideally, what you'll want to do here is put the ice wall directly in front of a enemy ultimate or an enemy Junkrat or Pharah, or enemies who are able to inflict a lot of damage at a very rapid pace. Hopefully these enemies shoot at the ice wall, as many enemies just tend to wait until it disappears instead of actually trying to power their way through it. If you can manage to throw up your ice wall in front of something that deals enough damage to it, the achievement or trophy will unlock quite easily. Mei's ultimate related achievement / trophy is called Cold Snap for freezing 4 enemies at once with Mei. Now, you don't actually have to use your ultimate to freeze all 4, but this is definitely going to make it a lot easier, as you can only realistically freeze 1 enemy at a time using your spray. What you'll probably want to do is be on defense while the enemies are on a payload, and then throw your ultimate near a payload in order to start freezing multiple enemies at a time. Hopefully all these enemies comprise of slow moving large enemies that can easily be frozen, and feel free to mop up a 4th enemy using your spray gun to have at least 4 total enemies all frozen at once. Realize that you throw your ultimate similar to a grenade, so you can actually use it at quite a distance in order to get a lot of enemies. This one's going to take a little bit of trial and error, and the element of surprise is always going to be helpful. Upon having 4 enemies frozen at once, again, at least 3 of which by your ultimate, the achievement or trophy will unlock. Thank you guys so much for watching the Overwatch How to Mei video, one of my favorite defensive characters and most underrated characters in the game. Trust me when I say that it's worth learning Mei because you can absolutely dominate the battlefield. The amount of enemy resources that you can milk just by cycling your 2 abilities is actually crazy. Mix that with a little bit of team communication, and she is definitely someone you want to have on your team, but probably not more than 1 of them at a time. Again, use her to create choke points, slow down enemies, and be a pest to be most effective. Special shout out goes to The Gigs as well as DocCupcake84 for supporting the show on Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I see you next time. Peace.